Off the Chain.
Welcome to another episode of Off the Chain podcast. And this is your host, Armel Nene. And today we have a Java champion, Ivar Grimstad, is also the evangelist for Jakarta EE at the Eclipse Foundation. Also involved with Jakarta, the Eclipse Microprofile project. So, Ivar, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me here at this podcast. As you said, I'm the Jakarta EE developer advocate at Eclipse Foundation. So my day job is to talk about Jakarta EE and also the surrounding technologies, like you mentioned, Microprofile. So I'm looking forward to have this discussion with you here today.
Great. So just to fire a very quick question. What's the state of the current Jakarta EE?
So the current state of Jakarta EE is that we are working on finalizing the Jakarta EE 9. And the way we're doing it this time, and this is kind of new in Java EE and Jakarta EE world, is that we're aiming for doing a milestone release. So in June, we will publish a milestone release of Jakarta EE 9. And this milestone release will give us the opportunity to have all the vendors, all the tool providers, all the users of Jakarta EE and Java EE technologies out there to test it and help us to get it right. And then after summer, we will launch a general availability release.
Okay, so this this milestone release that you are planning for June, does it have any new features or what will it contain? What will be part of the release?
The single most important thing we're delivering this time is the namespace change. Okay. So we need to switch the namespace, or all the packages are today Java X namespace. So for example, the servlet specification is in Java X servlet. And we have to move that over to Jakarta. So the servlet would now be in Jakarta.servlet package. So that's the biggest change we're doing here. And that is also the reason why we're doing the milestone release, to get everybody on board. Because when you talk about Java EE and Jakarta EE technologies, you think, okay, but that's all the big customer, that's the banks, that's the financial institutions, that's all the old Java EE servers. But if you think about it, almost everything that uses Java today in any cloud, like Microprofile or even Spring Framework, will be affected by this. Because when we change these namespaces, we need to get the community involved in going over this hurdle, so we can kind of bring it home.
So this namespace change from the JavaX packages to the new Jakarta EE packages will break a lot of backward compatibility, no?
Yes, it will. But we are trying to minimize the impact. So while the specification doesn't require you to have backwards compatible back to Jakarta EE 8, the vendors can do it. And we are creating some tooling, a transformer project at Eclipse Foundation that was initiated by IBM, but it's aiming to actually transform your bytecode from the Java X namespace to the Jakarta namespace, so you can kind of do this without touching your code. Well, a bit of testing will involve those, but we're looking at these tooling, and maybe some of the vendors will also provide servers, application servers that will support both namespaces, and you can mix and match. But that is kind of a implementation detail that the different vendors will look at.
Yeah, so if we can backtrack for a little bit, what is Jakarta EE?
Okay, so Jakarta EE is the new home of Enterprise Java. So back in 2017, when Oracle announced that they wanted to open source Java EE, and they didn't want to do it through the JCP, the Java community process, they wanted to move it to an open source foundation, and Eclipse Foundation was chosen to this. So the years between 2017 and up until January last year, we were working on doing this switch, because it's a massive amount of projects. It's a lot of code, and a lot of legal stuff that just had to be done to get it right. So what we've done is to set up a standardization organization at Eclipse Foundation so we can actually create standards, because this is not just a regular open source project. This is a massive machinery that has been put in place, and we put a lot of effort in it to make it as easy for people to contribute and consume this technology and make it a new life at Eclipse Foundation.
So Jakarta EE is the true version, open source version of Java EE.
Yeah, you can put it that way. Yeah.
And at the foundation is the same as Java EE 8. Right, the latest release that you'll be making is the same as Java EE 8, but the only difference here is the namespace.
Yes, so what we did last year was to release Jakarta EE 8. And Jakarta EE 8 is exactly the same function-wise as Java EE 8, but it was put through the Jakarta EE specification process. So the IP is cleared and everything is good to go. But it was still in the JavaX namespace. But the Maven coordinates changed. So in order to use Jakarta EE 8, you switch your dependency in your POM file from JavaX to Jakarta. And in this release, the version 9, we are doing the namespace change globally.
Okay, which is a very big job. But there's also, at the same time, when Jakarta EE project started, we also saw the Eclipse Microprofile. So what exactly is the Microprofile project?
So Eclipse Microprofile started a little bit before Jakarta EE. It was a couple of vendors and communities that got together to create some APIs and specifications that build on the Java EE technologies, kind of to close the gap and keep up with Spring Boot. So they created a couple of APIs that are very useful for creating microservices, such as externalized configuration, distributed tracing, and health checks, and security, and etc. So it's a set of specifications that build on proven Java EE technologies that makes it easier to create microservices. And that means that if you are a old Java EE developer and wants to do microservices, the learning path or learning curve of going the microprofile way is probably a little less steep than if you were to switch entirely to Spring Boot and do it that way.
Okay, so now a lot of applications are moving to our cloud. Want to be cloud ready, cloud, whatever that means, is application level cloud readiness or is it infrastructure level cloud readiness. If we take macroprofiles as an example, you already mentioned things like telemetry, right? So open tracing, I believe they have some standard for Jaeger and Prometheus, or any other. Is Jakarta EE moving the same direction as our Microprofile? Is it one point where they're going to converge both projects together?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and it's been a lot of discussions going on around this. And currently, Microprofile is an Eclipse project, and what they are working on right now is to create a working group for Microprofile that will be at the same level as the Jakarta EE working group. And they're doing this because they need to fill the gap in IP. So now we're talking legal stuff again. It has nothing to do with developers or technologists or anything. It's just lawyers and boring stuff. But it just has to be done, because in order for us to do our work and create the stuff we like to do and produce cool stuff, the legal has to be there, and it has to be this foundation. Yes. And they're in the process of creating a working group, and then they are at the same level as Jakarta EE, and then actually Jakarta EE can consume the APIs that Microprofile offer. And if you look at the runtimes that supports Microprofile, almost all of them are also Jakarta EE compatible, or at least they support a pretty large subset of the specification of Jakarta EE. So it's very natural to combine these two, and the runtimes already support it.
converging at some point would be really great. And you mentioned the boring stuff from the legal aspect of licensing, so that one can call the other. At the same time, there are new languages, right, being introduced to the market. So, and again, they be for the same developers. So they want the same developers, or they want the same market, so enterprise market, right? So a lot of people still work on Java application now, Spring or Jakarta, so they're still working on it. How is there anything that you would like to see in Jakarta EE next version? Not version 9, but no, the oncoming version.
So
Yep.
So you're talking about support for other languages than Java, and currently we're only looking at Java. Yes. But potentially any JVM language could be possible, but that's not anything we are currently working on. But if that's the direction the community goes, who knows? I mean, nobody can look into the future more than a little ahead, but if I look into the crystal ball a little bit, I would guess that we are probably going to stick with Java for the foreseeable future.
Oh, definitely. Let me try to rephrase the question. I think I probably didn't ask it properly. Is what do we see? How can we make Java more cloud friendly, right? So things around, core startup time in Java really bad for serverless environment, and some other project like Quarkus, yes. Right? Been looking to that. Micronaut is another project who has been looking to that.
Yeah. So Java is already pretty cloud friendly, and based on the work that started with Java 9 and upwards, they've introduced modularity in Java, and you have this tooling that you can use J-Link to reduce the size of your runtime. Yes. So that is one aspect. So you can actually have your JVM that runs in your container or any other cloud technology as small as you want it to be. That's one aspect. So Java is already taking that as the foundation. And then you have the, you mentioned GraalVM, which is very interesting, especially with serverless, since you can compile to native images and make it even smaller. And a lot of these implementations of Microprofile, for example, supports compiling using GraalVM to native. You mentioned Quarkus is one of them. And, I mean, that's important for today for serverless, and it's an excellent fit. Currently, I think there are some limitations in the substrate VM that is actually the runtime for native Java applications, that the garbage collection isn't that good to have longer running things. So if you're thinking microservices, it may not be the way to go because the Java VM is so optimized. So you probably are better off doing a real Java and running it on a real Java VM. But for serverless, where you start up processes and kill processes like thousands in a second, garbage collection doesn't matter. And so the native and ahead of time compilation to native, like GraalVM supports and Quarkus uses, it's excellent for serverless.
So you mentioned that Microprofile project does support compile to native, I believe, for J-Link, right? Does that mean that Jakarta EE will also support that? Is there any chance for Jakarta to support it out of the box?
Yeah, I don't think Microprofile says anything about this. Okay. But products that implements Microprofile can support it, like Quarkus, for example. But if you also look closer between the lines there, Quarkus doesn't implement CDI. They have their own implementation of CDI, which isn't the same as the Jakarta EE version. So because Jakarta EE is so based on so many dynamic features and reflection, and that doesn't play very well if you're compiling ahead of time and creating the object structure before you start your application. At the Microprofile mailing list, they are discussing that they need a CDI Lite version. And that is something, if we implement that in Jakarta EE, then suddenly Jakarta EE is getting closer to be possible to compile native as well. So it's not a far step, and we could see it as early as in Jakarta EE 10.
Okay, that's very interesting.
It's not promising anything though.
That's very interesting, and how also we kind of making the difference between Jakarta EE and Microprofile, right? So one of the things that Quarkus says is that they support Microprofile, right? And as mentioned, they have their own implementation of the CDI, which is not following the Jakarta EE, the Java EE, so it's kind of breaking the standard. Are we with Jakarta, with Microprofile and the rest and Quarkus, are we going to see more framework coming out breaking the standard, similar in the way that really Spring Boot was doing, and we're not fixing anything, but having all those different frameworks?
I mean, that's always a possibility that happens. But what we will have to do in the Jakarta side is to make that standard so good that you don't have to break it in order to do the cooler stuff. So if we remove this, have a lighter version of CDI and maybe tweak how we look at the profiles. We have two profiles in Jakarta EE today, a web profile and a full profile. We're talking about maybe creating more profiles or maybe no profiles at all, just have independent specs. So we haven't really decided there, and we are not the deciding, or when I say we, it's the community. So if the community wants to go a particular direction, that's where Jakarta EE goes.
Yes. So now we have the Jakarta EE project. Before, we used to have all the Java standard development environment being released. So version 8 will get released, and then we get the enterprise version released maybe a couple of months or a year later, which kind of builds on what's been released in the standard version. How are you going to keep in line now with the release of the actual standard version and the web Jakarta EE version?
Yeah, so one of the things we are introducing in Jakarta EE 9 is Java 11 support. So and the previous version we had Java 8 support. So we're kind of aiming for the long-term support releases for Java. So I guess that Jakarta EE 10, if we can get that out next year, it will probably still be on Java 11, but then the next version would probably pick the LTS version that has been launched before that. So we will take the version that most people are using, and it seems like most people are still on 8, moving to 11. So it makes sense. And what we're doing in 9 is that we are saying that we compile the APIs with 11, and it should be tested on 11, but it should be able to run on 8 if you wanted to.
Okay. But so enterprises starting new Java projects at the moment. Do you have any advice for them? Should they wait for Jakarta EE 9 to not to be released in June? Or can they just start with Jakarta EE 8? Or should they just stick to Java EE 8? Right.
So, I would definitely say that you should go on Jakarta EE 8, but and that will not impact you anyway. From Java EE 8, Jakarta EE 8 is in practice similar, but I would start with the Jakarta EE 8 and watch closely the Jakarta EE 9, and as soon as that is out there and the implementation you're using is providing the support that you want in your project, the level of support, then I would take the switch to Jakarta EE 9.
So what about to new developers? Developers come into the Java ecosystem, they start learning to write Java enterprise applications. Will you give them some advice to look at Jakarta EE 8? to monitor closely Jakarta EE9. I mean, the only real difference is just the namespace, right? So, so what advice do you have for them?
I haven't. The advice I'd have to, no matter if you're a new or an old developer, if you're experienced or not, I would say join the community and participate. And you may think that creating these specifications in enterprise, it requires you to have gray hair and have been in the business for a very long time. But we need the younger people, and it's a lot of things you can contribute with without actually knowing the code. We need sample codes, and we need documentation, and we need people to discuss with that have another angle than the people who have been there for a long time. So I would say join the Jakarta EE community mailing lists. See what's going on. See if there are some technologies there that you are interested in. Join that mailing list. If there are any technologies you are not seeing there, well, put up a question on the mailing list and see if somebody answers. So get involved in the community.
So more question around the enterprise feature of Jakarta. The upcoming features, maybe Jakarta 10, 11, whichever, is around security. So as in authentication, security authorization. At the moment, a lot of people, that I used to work with, kind of obviously how complex the security is to implement, and they want to be able to, easily add OAuth to OpenID Connect, any of those new security frameworks. So is there anything on the roadmap for that?
So we did for Java E8, we did the Java EE security, a new specification there that kind of made it application developer friendly to configure the security for your application.
Is it the Soteria?
The Soteria is the implementation, yes.
Okay. Yep.
So that project has kind of created a good foundation, so you can integrate with all these sorts of security technologies, and I suspect this is one specification that will be moving forward and have some goodies for you in Jakarta EE10. While you're waiting for that, the integration between the Microprofile JSON Web Token propagation and Java security is already pretty much implemented by all the vendors. So you can have a JSON Web Token with some security credentials and actually hook directly into a Java security in pretty easy way.
And on the database side of things, we have the JPA talking to mostly EE DBMS. Is there anything in the roadmap for the JDBC to talk to something like Mongo or NoSQL database for
yes,
the JPA?
Yes, we actually have a brand new specification called Jakarta NoSQL, and there is an implementation there. It's Eclipse NoSQL, so it's already you can use it and try it out. And I suspect that for 10 we will have the NoSQL specification incorporated into the platform. It will not be JPA, but it will be similar. So you kind of abstract away which sort of NoSQL database you're using, whether it's a document database or a graph database or any of the other flavors.
Okay, so what will be the moving forward? If you want people to move away from Spring Boot to Jakarta EE, I mean, what will you tell them? How to tell someone to not work without Spring Boot anymore? Maybe because it's not standard friendly, they have their own implementation. But as an evangelist for Eclipse Jakarta EE, how will you approach that?
So the question is how I would approach getting a Spring Boot developer over to Jakarta EE.
That's
well,
right.
I actually had a pretty fun discussion with a group of Spring developers last summer, and my statement was, come and look at how we do things in Jakarta EE and Microprofile, and get rid of all the configuration stuff you're doing in Spring. Because my feeling, I also did some Spring work last year, and my feeling was that I was configuring things all the time. And I wasn't used to that because I was used to the Java EE way, which is very low on configuration. And there are we had this discussion back and forth, and some of them, it was actually an eye opener for some of them to see, oh, it's actually pretty neat how you're doing it this way. And the same way I can say the same about Spring, because they're doing some cool stuff. It's pretty neat there. So I think both of us are stealing a little bit from each other, and that's fine because it's open source, both of them. So having two pretty much comparable frameworks out there, kind of creating a little bit of competition, but we're making each other better. So if we had a monopoly on one framework, it would probably be pretty bad. We'd probably still be at J2EE then. But with Spring coming on and kind of showing the way, and then Java EE catching up, and now Spring Boot is a little bit ahead again, and then we're enjoying this kind of race.
All right, and okay, so the next question that someone just sent me is around containers, right? Running Java in a container. Is there a way to make better use of container for Java application? I know we could just create let's say a Docker image of our application and run it, but Java runs in the JVM, right? So that is not aware of its environment. Can we make them more aware of the environment, make the best use of using containers, basically?
Yeah, I think they introduced in, was it in Java 12 or even before, that the JVM is more container aware.
Okay.
So at least it knows how much memory it has and how much because in previous Java versions you would kind of get the host machine's memory, and then you would know how much you have given that container. But I think the later version of Java kind of takes this into account.
All right, and you know how we work with Java, we use Maven or Gradle, and if you look at other projects like Node, where they have the NPM, or they could just get the dependency from NPM. Is there a way to do a Java distribution like NPM? I mean, what's your personal opinion on that? Right? So if Java had something like similar to NPM, right? Maybe run on the JVM directly, so you could say, okay, NPM install, I don't know, some WebSockets application, and then you can just pick it up directly from Java in your code.
Probably. I haven't thought that way, but yeah, it could be interesting. What is also kind of notable is in Java 14 you had this preview feature with where you can just run a single class Java from command line. Kind of similar as you would do with Python, I guess. But so I think the Java, the OpenJDK folks are closely looking at how the other languages are doing things and how the other communities are doing things, and listening to that and doing what works. Not jump on the first kind of train. Look, see if it works, and then do it.
So I mean, that's actually, it's all dependent on the platform, right? So maybe something that works for the NPM guys is not the best way to go forward for Java, or vice versa. But if you take into consideration something like, all right, so you create microservices, right? Actually, just another question quickly that I always have that conversation with people, right? What's your definition to you? What's the definition of microservices? Is it micro in terms of size, or is it micro in terms of economics? All right.
I would say a microservice is something that works on one domain, and it does one thing, and it does it extremely well.
I agree. I share the same definition, because some people actually come across and say, okay, actually, microservice is a bunch of different services, small services combined together for whatever becomes a microservice. And that sounds more like doing microeconomics instead of the size, right? So I always like to know what other people's opinion is on that. But I mean, that's good anyway. That you shared yours is probably the same thing that I have. All right, so coming back to when building microservices with Java, right, with Jakarta EE, will there be support for, I mean, Jakarta EE already support REST, right? And GraphQL actually is what I'm thinking of.
Okay, so we don't have any plans for GraphQL right now in Jakarta EE. There is a standalone specification in Microprofile for GraphQL.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a potential way, depending on how we want to do, because I think in Microprofile they are discussing, they have a little growing pains. They don't want to make too many specifications to make it too hard to for a first time implementer to implement it. So GraphQL could very well be a specification that fits better into Jakarta EE than to Microprofile. So we'll see where it goes. The philosophy of Jakarta EE, as opposed to with Java EE, is that with Jakarta EE we don't want to go up there and try to make the best specification from scratch. We want to do something that has proven to work. So there has to be some implementation out there, some use case that, or some problem that has been solved. And when we have an implementation there, and it is an interest of standardizing it, then we can standardize it. So we're doing what we call the code first rather than the specification first approach.
Okay, I'm just conscious of time, and I know you got another meeting after this. Quick question: we spoke a lot about the server side things. Yeah. What about on the front end? In the past, we had JSPs and JSF. What's the plan on Jakarta EE?
Yeah, so I'm very glad you asked that question, because I used to be one of the spec leads for MVC specification for Java EE, and last week we proposed a project proposal as Jakarta MVC, so we're moving it over to Eclipse Foundation, and it has been approved by the specification committee. So this week we'll be starting to set up that project. So I hope for Jakarta EE10 we can have a action-based MVC framework in the specification as well.
Okay, cool. Looking forward to it. So thanks, Ivar, for coming to Off the Chain podcast again. And I know that you have to run off, but thanks. And any last word before we part?
Yeah, I just want to encourage everybody to don't stop learning, get engaged in open source, because that's the best way to be a better developer.
Definitely. I mean, that's, I would say the same thing, just get involved with open source. And if you want to learn, that's probably the best way to learn it. And getting involved with the community, you see what's going on as well. And it doesn't matter how new you are, but your voice will be heard. Yeah. Right? So thanks Ivar, for coming with us on the show Off the Chain. And thanks for everybody for watching and listening. Thank you. Until then, see you next time and look after yourself.